Welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of The Moving Screen. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic. I'm here with Dylan Burkhart from Hoops. We're still going. If you thought we were going to be a fluke and we were just going to stop with episode 1, no. We are defying the odds. What do you say, Dylan?
Excited to do this. Let's hope we do a better job in the second episode.
What was wrong with the first?
Work in progress.
Oh, man. You're all right. Quite the judge. Quite the critic, you know? Dylan, we want to make sure to tell everyone a very important bit of information to subscribe to this podcast on whatever. I didn't even know that there were this many things that you can subscribe to a podcast on, but apparently there are many, and we are on all, if not most of them, Dylan?
Hope so. I've been submitting it to a lot of people have reached out about this service or that, but I think most places you can find a podcast, you should be able to find this one. So rate, review, subscribe.
If you guys can't tell, Dylan is very much the brains and the tech side of this operation, whereas I bring very little to the table. Thoughts on that, Dylan?
Well, we've managed to start recording this podcast after trying for 30 minutes, so that's good.
All right, so make sure, if you are willing to subscribe, leave a rating. I know that's good, apparently, especially in the iTunes store. If you leave a rating, you want to write how great this podcast is proving to be. I would say we are unique. There are not many Michigan State centric Big Ten basketball podcast. I believe we're first to market on that. So
created our own niche.
There you go. All right. So obviously we will get to our early thoughts on both Michigan and Michigan State and the league over the course of this episode. But we want to start with what is certainly the game of the week. Michigan Villanova in the Philadelphia suburbs. On Wednesday night. It is a rematch of the national championship game in name only. Most of the star players from last year's game have gone on to longer schedules and wealth. So the guys that are still in those college uniforms, though, are going to meet up on Wednesday. I know I'm really looking forward to it, but what are your baseline thoughts here, Dylan?
I was watching back the first half this morning just to kind of remember what happened. And it was really remarkable just watching both teams. You think like the first 5-10 possessions, you have a plan, you have exactly what you want to do. And everything that Michigan ran was through players who are no longer here.
Yep.
And everything that Villanova ran was through players who are no longer there. It was all about just creating, switching, getting Mo involved, slipping to the basket. That was really the only good stretch that Michigan had offensively in that game until Villanova made some adjustments and then started to kind of take that away.
Yeah.
I also noticed that at the end of the first half, which is really where Michigan came undone.
Yep.
The 4 players who really played and are back this year were all on the court, and they were on their floor with Mo, and that was kind of when the wheels fell off.
Yep.
Which is probably a little bit interesting in terms of they were on the court, they just weren't making plays in that game. So Villanova seems to have picked up at a little bit of a higher level this year to start out than Michigan has. Maybe a few more experienced pieces, but that's sort of how I see it. What do you think of what are your expectations for this one?
Well, you're right. I mean, Villanova probably has a 1 foot out, maybe a little bit further in front of Michigan. I don't think it's that dramatically different. The difference is that they can just score the ball a little bit more, and Michigan probably defends better, right? Michigan's returnees are far more inclined for the offensive side. Villanova's returnees are far more inclined on the offensive side, and they have 2 starters back from that team. But I also rewatched the game this weekend. And it really was a bizarre. I have not watched that game again, not for any other reason than not particularly needing to, but to go back and rewatch that game. I mean, when you're in the moment, it's such a big thing to cover that it's really kind of hard you miss so much. And you forget that Michigan was up 21-14 early, and like the defense was working. I mean, they were getting in Villanova. All their middle and side ball screens were so well guarded. They were up in their stuff. Every shot was contested. And then the game really turned on that first DiVincenzo three. It was a little side ball screen that he just didn't even use. He just went over the top and pulled up from about 30 and canned it, and definitely got Michigan's attention. And they kind of started to step out a little bit more on the perimeter. And then he hit another one that Muhammad was a little slow on stepping out. He had 1 foot inside the arc. He wasn't out far enough. He hit another one. And then you kind of started to see, it started to change. And Michigan then went really far out on DiVincenzo. And then he beat Muhammad off the dribble once. Then he beat Charles Matthews on a back cut for a dunk. And that was it. Like Michigan, they just kind of came, the momentum swung, and it just never went back. I mean, you forget when you watch the game and you look at the box score. Villanova had 6 guys entering that game averaging double figures for the season. And they held 4 of them to single digits in that game. Brunson, it was, I believe, the only game he finished in single digits all year. He's the National Player of the Year. At the end of the game, you say, Mikal Bridges had 19. Okay, you give Mikal Bridges 19, right? Those other guys all being in single digits, you couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, DiVincenzo single-handedly won that game for them, really. And like, I knew it that night, you know what I mean? Like, I knew he had this incredible game, but until going back and rewatching it, I'm like, holy crap, this guy literally won them the national championship.
I think what was also going on during that stretch, though, is Michigan's offense completely flatlined.
Yes.
Duncan got 2 quick fouls, never really played in the first half, which left the guys on this team to try to make plays and bring that something else to the offense other than Mo, and they never really did. That was quite apparent as it just sort of dragged and dragged. Like it wasn't like DiVincenzo scored all those points in 45 seconds on like 3 quick possessions and then a breakout dunk. It was a slow kind of methodical grind where it just slipped, and then they had that 2-for-1 at the end, and it just kind of
that dagger 3 by Brunson when they rolled the ball up and he just pulled up from 26 feet out, and that, I mean, they made it. It could have easily been 34-30 at the half or 32-28 at the half, something like that. Totally different game, totally different halftime locker room, all that stuff. Instead, it was an 11-point game, and I mean, that was a team with 4 NBA players on it. You're not just coming back in the second half, especially when you have the National Player of the Year at point guard and a guy who's playing in his own universe, just chucking threes in, doing whatever the hell he wanted. I mean, he was just amazing. He was absolutely amazing in that game.
He was, but he's not playing in the game.
He's not playing
on Wednesday.
Okay, so this matchup, I mean, it really comes down to, I think it will be easier for Villanova to guard Michigan than it will be for Michigan to guard Villanova. And, I would probably put Michigan at a 6.5, 7-point underdog. How's that sound to you?
I think Ken Pom has it at 7 or 8.
Okay.
So a little high. What's crazy about Villanova is everyone's pegging this as a rebuilding year, but they have a 6'3" guy who scored 20 points in the national championship game as a sophomore. Now he's a senior.
Yep.
They have a 6'8" big guy, 260 pounds, who can shoot threes, drive, and play defense.
Yes.
That's a pretty good senior duo to build off of in a year that's supposed to be a rebuilding year.
Right. And so Eric Paschal, who is excellent and would be way more well-known if he didn't play behind those 4 guys last year. You forget that he played with Omari Spellman. I mean, my God. But, 6'8", 255, just a tank. He can take you off the bounce and finish over you. He can hit a 3 over the, but the big thing being he's playing the 5 for them right now. When I saw some clips against Quinnipiac.
I believe he starts at the 4.
Okay, but he's playing a lot of 5.
He'll play probably 50-50 split between those 2 spots. They have a couple big guys. They started, I think, Dylan Painter in one game, and then the Cosby Roundtree is a 6'9" sophomore
Yeah.
who started the Quinnipiac game.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go. So that they can go big, but I think that they will eventually go to Pascal at the 5 because they can do so much more with that look.
Right, and Roundtree, if I remember, if I remember from Newman Goretti in high school, I don't know much about him in college, but I think he's more of a true post big, not a guy who steps out. So, point being, when Pascal's in at the 5, they go 5 out. They get out in transition. They play fast, and they just, they go down and they just spider web the 3-point line. You'll see possessions where no one goes through the paint other than maybe a cutter here and there, and they just kind of hunt shots all day over you. It'll be a lot of the stuff Michigan saw last year. It's not really complicated what Nova runs. Middle screens, sideline screens, and then just kind of attack you. They'll occasionally get guys in ISO and go at you that way. So, Michigan has to hold them to like 65 points. Tops.
Because
Michigan and then figure out a way to
many
get
more. Because their defense has been good. The two things I noticed about Villanova, one, like you say, they shoot a lot of threes. In 2 blowout wins, over half of their shots were from 3. That's a really high number, even for that's a mid-major number. It's very rare that you'll see a team that high. Obviously, it's just 2 games. They also have rebounded 48% of their missed shots in the first 2 games. And that, I think, speaks to some of the young kids they have who are super talented. Might not be proven, but like the Jermaine Samuels is a 6'7", 220 kid who's a tank. He's all over the offensive glass and maybe still figuring out how to play. But as a sophomore, I think he's going to be really good for them. Mm-hmm. They just have a sort of a new level of talent that's coming up as the next wave. And I'm not sure how ready all those guys are right now, but you could see any one of them just going off and taking over a game because they're that good.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I do feel like this year's team is Booth and Pascal. Either one can put 20 on you. Maybe both of them can put 20 on you. But the difference last year was you had Brunson and Bridges who could do that, but any of those other guys could go and get 20 at any given time. I don't know how ready the guys are now beyond Pascal and Booth to do that tonight, on Wednesday night. Go put, I don't see Colin Gillespie going and coming out of nowhere to put up 20. And Colin Gillespie is kind of a sophomore guard he reminds Villanova people of kind of like a Ryan Arcidiacono. I just do my best with that name, but that's kind of the vein that he's out of.
And they're starting him right now and not the top 50 point guard, right, Javon Quinterly. He's kind of struggled the first 2 games, and they're just running Gillespie at the point guard and kind of going with the solid option there.
Yeah. But
they also have the – go ahead.
I was just going to switch over and just, Michigan, the biggest question is still how does Michigan get to 68 or 70? Because I do think they could keep Nova to 65, right? I do think that this defense is capable of doing that. Even at home, whatever. I don't know if the offense is capable of getting to 68.
They haven't got there yet, have they?
I know they didn't the other night. That Holy Cross game was something to behold. I don't know. The offense is just it's fascinating to see what is going on right now with this team.
It's also I'm not sure that you could have expected anything else. I think the biggest...
You could expect Jordan Poole to have more than 5 points or whatever he's got on the season.
Yeah, Jordan Poole is really... If Michigan's offense is going to be better than it looked like on paper, it was going to be because Jordan Poole is taking 12, 13 shots a game and is efficient with it, more efficient than anyone else on the roster. Mm-hmm. He is not. He hasn't really even been it's not that he's been inefficient, he just hasn't been able to really get involved in the flow of the offense, which has been surprising to me. And,
if not for Ignas Brazdeikis, who has 19 in one game and 12 in another, he scored 19 of 56 points in the Holy Cross game. and had 12 of 63 in their first game. This is a guy that is basically the option of last resort. It's get the ball in his hand. You could tell what happened at halftime of that Holy Cross game. It was okay. We can't really run offense, so we're just going to put the ball in Matthews and Brazdeikis' hands and just try to get buckets and draw fouls and just grind this thing out, which is essentially what they did.
How much, if any, of Michigan's offensive struggles would you attribute to playing sort of weird zone defenses in both of their first games?
I mean, I think it certainly has some role in it, but look, I mean, they're not playing Syracuse, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to be able to go and shoot, right? Like, it's not like they've been taking these contested jumpers and been and against attacking defenses that are running the shot clock down. They either can't get shots or they can't make the open shots. So I think it's far more a product of that.
Yeah, I was looking up just like the early synergy stats, and Michigan hasn't scored a point in isolation or ball screens out of the ball handler. So they've had a couple ball screen assists, but there's been no playmate. Like, no one has taken the ball around a ball screen, shot a three off the dribble, or even taken it to the hole. They've just that hasn't even been a part of their offense, which is pretty crazy when you consider it.
I mean, I was going to say, you think about who's attacking off of the ball screens.
Not sure. They haven't had that many possessions either, like you say. Matthews hasn't really been involved in that way, in a way that early last year he really was. As the season went on, they kind of shifted his role around a little bit. I really thought Jordan Poole would be that guy. Xavier Simpson has not really been that guy. He's sort of been more of a ball mover. He's not really looking for his own offense at all right now. I think that they need to, if they're going to get better on offense, especially early in the year, it's going to have to come a lot out of transition.
Yes.
They need to figure out a way. Holy Cross is probably better than anyone at taking that away, which is how you end up with Michigan scoring 18 points in a half. Right. In a game against better teams, they're not going to, I don't think Villanova's going to crash the glass. Villanova would be okay with a little bit of an up-tempo game, and that might almost help Michigan for them to just be able to play and not sort of grind out a 60 possession game and half court execute. Villanova's not necessarily going to make them try to do that, I don't think.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. They got to cheat. They got to find a way to get some easy baskets, one way or another. The problem is that, they're going to play a team that has equal, if not better, athletes than them who can get up and down the floor better. What like a transition offense with this group looks like, I'm not sure, because like who are your threats as a trail man? To actually bang a three. You got maybe a couple guys on the entire roster. It's just you have to just go to the rim every touch, essentially.
A transition offense for this looks like Charles Matthews or Brazdeikis rebounding the ball, putting their head down, and driving straight to the basket. Right. Maybe looking for a trailing big man to dump the ball off to or something like that. But they need, even who you're going to have running the wings. You'll have Isaiah Livers. He's looking for a lob pass right now, not a three. You need some way to create that spacing, and I don't know where you're getting it.
Right. And, Poole, I think this is a very interesting game for Poole because, he's this big-time player, right, who comes up on the biggest stage and he does this. That's kind of the reputation that's going to be there. In theory, well, okay, this would be the time playing on the home court of the defending national champion that whooped you in last year's national championship game. He needs to go out, and they need his offensive swagger or whatever word you want to use. They don't have any identity on offense whatsoever right now.
And it's just strange because Beeline's spoken so much about how Poole needs to learn the ball's not a grenade. He needs to be more patient. He needs to be more like Muhammad Ali. And I feel like sort of the knock on Muhammad Ali through a lot of his career was that he didn't really always take over games. He was sort of drift in and out of games, right? Like he was steady, but he wasn't always. He really increased his playmaking load late in his career. They I don't see you need to run more offense through Jordan Poole because I think he's the most naturally talented at finding guys, getting in the paint, shooting the ball. I mean, he has those talents, and I don't know who else on this team does.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the problem with Poole that kind of carries over a little bit from last year in terms of the role that we're talking about right now is I think him and Muhammad were probably basically listed as the same size, like 6'4", 190. But like when Muhammad put his shoulders down, he could play through contact. He could play through the middle of the floor and not be knocked off of his path or anything like that. Like Poole is not yet that guy physically, where he is not really a dip your shoulder play into contact and make something happen. You know, he kind of flails out of those situations, or will make a pass out of it. He's not really making plays in those. But like I still haven't really seen Jordan Poole go off the bounce in the half court. Like it sounds good in theory, but how much is he ready to kind of take on a role like John was talking about? This is kind of that. It's a little bit of Zach Irvin freshman to sophomore year of a guy who just kind of got to play as a hired gun, now having to learn how to be a basketball player.
I just go back to last year. Every time Michigan's offense struggled, Poole would come in, and he wasn't just shooting the ball. He bailed them out of easily 3 or 4 Big Ten games with just and he was scoring. He can get past guys. He can drive to the rim. I don't think he's a physical player, but he can finish around the basket, and he makes more assists that look like, okay, he did, like, there's an assist to a wide open guy, and then there's assists where you're making a play. And I think he has shown that potential, but he hasn't shown it this year, that's for sure.
I mean, Jordan Poole made 34 2-point baskets last year and 38 threes.
He wasn't playing.
I understand. I don't remember him going in and attacking the rim, or I remember him shooting a lot of threes.
Well, he's made 1 shot in 2 games, so something has to change.
Yeah, he needs to do something for sure. Do we want to get into a prediction, or do you have anything else you want to talk about this game?
I mean, you are familiar with Villanova. How big do you think opening their new arena plays into this, and what sort of atmosphere do you expect?
So they have played a game there, so people will have gotten a look at the place. But basically, the pavilion, it's on campus. It holds 6,500. It's a very strange building. It looks like the inside of it looks like a circus tent, where it's got these big points in the ceiling, and then the seats kind of shoot into corners at midcourt on both sides behind one basket, and then the opposite side is just basically a wall of a student section. It's intimate, so it can get loud, and there is a good-sized student section there that it can get loud. Villanova kind of has a little bit of a wine and cheese reputation, for a lot of reasons, but it's a tough place to play. I mean, I would bet if we pulled up Jay Wright's record in that building, it's probably somewhere around like 85 or 90%, something just completely stupid. And now that part of that's because they play their big games at the Wachovia Center, or Wells Fargo Center. I might be dating myself there, but that's where the Sixers play in South Philadelphia. So Villanova played all of their games there last year. They did not play a campus home game because the building was being rehabilitated, and they basically put like $50 million into it. It looks new. It's still oddly small for a program of this caliber, but there's a whole long story behind that I won't get into. But it'll be tough. It'll be a tough place to play. It won't be the most incredible environment Michigan has played in. These guys have played at Assembly Hall when it's rocking. They've played at Breslin when it's rocking. I don't think it'll be, some kind of hornet's nest. It's not like they're going to Cameron, put it that way.
Okay. So what's your prediction? What do you see?
I think Michigan is going to really struggle to get, over 55 points. I just can't see them grinding out 70 on me. It's a tough ask. That's a tough ask. So, I would probably say Villanova and, in an 8 to 10 point game.
Yeah, I think Villanova pulls away eventually. I think it'll be super low scoring for a stretch, and then there'll be a run that Michigan just can't match.
Right.
I think that Michigan's defense will hold its own in that first half because these guys played against them. They know the deal. They know, they'll be fired up, right? If you want to believe in the narrative, because they're the team that lost the national championship. Villanova's here to party.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There is the aspect of, guys like Xavier Simpson and Charles Matthews are going to be out there, ready to chew glass to get into that game. And, that's kind of the X factor, no pun intended, but that's kind of the X factor in this, is just what does an angry version of this team look like? Because they do, that's a tough team. They do have the grit or whatever, cliche you want to use. That's real, and they have it. But you have to score the ball.
And TBD if Michigan can do that this year. I was looking up, I was looking through all the Big Ten games, and Michigan has the 2 worst offensive performances of any team in the conference this year in the first week, by a pretty wide margin, both in just raw points per possession and adjusted efficiency.
Yeah, it's their lowest effective field goal percentage since that debacle against South Carolina.
Yep, and I don't know that it's really unexpected that they can't shoot. I mean, they didn't shoot well in Spain. They haven't shot well in the preseason. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So let's transition over to Michigan State. The Kansas game was really strange because coming out of it, someone was like, "Yeah, what are you going to write about the game?" And I said, they didn't play poorly enough to say, "Oh man, these guys are in trouble," or blah blah blah, or there's some major issues. There was no grand takeaway out of a loss, but then they didn't play well enough to be like, "Hey, everything's going to be okay," right? It was just they kind of are a tough team to peg right now, but the game on Sunday against Florida Gulf Coast was kind of just went as is, but there are issues with turnovers, there are issues with defense that are very real, and I think right now, in terms of assessing this team on November 12th, which really, what are you breaking down? But right now, for what their issues are, what's this? The saying, turnovers are hard to defend.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that they need to do to address their defense is cut down on their turnovers. They just can't continue. It's been going on since last year. Most of them are unforced. It's incredible.
We say this every year about Michigan State and turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
They've never been a team that doesn't turn the ball over. They always struggle. It's been going on last year. It's been going on for years. I think it's partially a product of how they play. They want to play super up tempo, and when you're going to be forcing the pace that much, you are bound to turn the ball over some. I don't even know if I don't think that's the biggest problem with their team by any means.
Well, I mean, I'd say in terms of improving their play right now, look, just because they've been turning the ball over a lot in recent years doesn't make it any less of an issue. Both of those teams, basically since, because what did the Final Four team in Denzel Valentine's senior year, what was their turnover percentage?
So that would be what, 2015?
Yeah.
It was 17.4. So they're 71st. And that's the best they've been since Ken Pom goes back, the highest ranked turnover percentage.
So, ranked 71st in the country is not horrific. That's fine. I think, especially if you're going to score as much as Michigan State can. But, just because you play fast and just because they play that kick ahead offense, you take the inbounds and you're in your opposite front court in 3 seconds, doesn't mean you get to be careless with the ball. And it'd be one thing if most of the turnovers were attacking or forced or whatever, but we're talking about Cassius Winston just dribbling the ball off his knee, or guys just making passes to nobody. And this has basically been going on since that freshman class came in.
So how does it change?
I think I don't know. I mean, other than just telling people to take care of the ball, I'm not sure what to do. But they're giving up too many baskets, and a lot are coming off turnovers. So I would say address that first. Obviously, there are layers upon layers that can be dissected from the first 2 games. But look, they lost that game to Kansas because, really, I mean, there were a number of reasons, but you can just point to turnovers and missed free throws, and they could have won the game. On a night they didn't play well.
They also shot 39% on twos against Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. I know they were in the game, and it's hard to win games when you shoot that poorly.
But do you think that's going to really be a lingering issue, is 2-point field goal percentage for this team?
I think that they are playing super fast because they have questions about how they can score in the half court. The thing that I noticed just looking at some of their stats, both of their games have been over 80 possessions. They only played 2 games over 80 possessions all of last year, and they were against Savannah State and North Florida, who were 2 of the top 10 fastest teams in the country. So they've been playing at an insane tempo, which, one, makes the defense look bad because everyone looks at giving up 80 points. But if you're giving up 82 points in an 83 possession game, that's not that bad. So the tempo really jumps out at me. They have the 11th fastest average possession length in college basketball right now, which is crazy fast. And I don't know if that keeps up, but it's certainly an interesting thing to watch, just in terms of their personnel. And I'm not sure why exactly that's happening, because you think you would be running just as much when you have Miles Bridges on the wing, but it seems that they've even been faster this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, shot selection while playing fast is still a thing, and I do think that improves naturally over time, especially when you get some film study in and you can see the errors. And a couple stats are skewed just from freshmen. They have played freshmen and they have made plenty of mistakes, and a guy Jack Hoiberg comes in late in the game and commits 2 turnovers in the last minute of that game. But it's really shot selection and taking care of the ball by your top 4 or 5 players. And I mean, look, Ward and Tillman are going to turn the ball over just because they get a lot of touches and they don't have the greatest hands in the world. So that's going to happen, but Ward, Langford, McQuaid, gotta be tighter with it right now.
Seems like Langford's been a bit of a pleasant surprise over the first week of the year. Would you agree with that or no?
Well, the first half of the Kansas game might have been the worst half he played in of his career.
Since that point.
That's the
big reason they shot back into that.
No doubt, and
second half of that.
I mean, that game was literally like the narrative story arc of Josh Langford's career, right? The first half where you're just kind of scratching your head, and in the second half you go, "Why isn't this guy like second team all league?" Right? You look back. I remember that North Carolina game last year in Oregon where he scored a career high. It was like 23 or 25 or something like that. And just doing all the stuff, right? Like hitting perimeter J's, getting to the basket. He was really efficient, like 8 for 11, something like that, 7 for something, I don't know. But he was great. And then you see him in other games, and it doesn't look like the same guy. And that Kansas game summed it all up. He did look really good against Florida Gulf Coast. And yeah, he needs to carry that. Like whatever's going on, positive momentum. And consistency have eluded him for 2 years. So maybe this is the start of it. Who knows?
Fair enough. What do you think? So they have basically 2 more bye games before they go to Vegas. What do you think they can kind of get out of those? Say they're all 2 teams ranked worse than Florida Gulf Coast, so it should be fairly straightforward. Do you think there's a wrinkle? Do you get a freshman ready? Is this where you get Foster Loyer ready to play by the time you go to Vegas? Do you see progress in any of those avenues?
Yeah, I mean, getting like Foster so far, I mean, the defense isn't spectacular, but he hasn't looked completely in over his head. I do think you can run him for these 2 games and then just let him get comfortable. Because, again, it's not like you need him to play 15 minutes. You're going to play Cassius for 32, 34 a game. But out of this, I think just caring about every individual possession. And like you said, if you're playing over 80 possessions, that's really hard. But if you're playing 11 guys or 10 guys, it shouldn't be that difficult, right? Because everyone on the court, you're not playing 6 guys 32 minutes who, yeah, you know what, they're going to take possessions off. But if you're going to rotate guys as much as Michigan State does, then every possession should be valued on both ends of the court. That's not exactly the case right now. But I do think, knowing Izzo, that has to be the number one talking point right now. I would certainly think so. There are possessions on defense where they'll just let the team score practically. They're just guys are just flat-footed, and you're like, well, where'd that come? And then the next time down, they're locked in and playing. Of course, it's 2 games in, and last night was, who cares, Florida Gulf Coast. But those are things that lead to bigger issues, and it's been seen with Michigan State in the last 2 years.
That game against Florida Gulf Coast got a little chippy though.
It did.
How did all that play out, and what do we make of it?
Well, I mean, I assumed. So we're talking about we'll start with the elbow from former Wolverine Ricky Doyle, Ricky Bones, as I called him back in the day. I assumed that he made contact with Ward because Ward kind of shot his head back. It looked like he glanced him. And then I got deluged by messages and DMs saying he didn't actually make contact with him. But the real issue with it was, Tom Izzo took a full step onto the court and yelled at Ricky Doyle, don't you ever elbow my player again. Don't you do that, bullshit, whatever. So that's screaming at him on the court. And the ref was kind of taken aback by him and banged him with a technical. I don't know if Florida Gulf's coach saw that happen. Because if he had, I would have imagined he would have bolted down to the side of the court. Like if you put that the other way around, right? Say Florida Gulf Coast's coach stepped out onto the court and screamed at Nick Ward, and Tom Izzo saw it. I mean, he would have ran down the sideline, and it would have been an international incident. I think. But
instead, it's just a November game at the Breslin Center.
November game at the Brez. But yeah, I mean, there were a million reviews in this game. I know we're going to talk about the hook and hold stuff that is really becoming very prevalent and is being ruled as a flagrant, and guys are getting ejected. I'm hoping to speak to some people soon to write something about this. Some people from the NCAA, some officials and stuff like that. But for now, I get where Tom was coming from last night. It was a long game. It was 2 hours and 10 minutes, and it didn't need to be. The reviews are too much. I'm not sure what's going on with the flagrants and stuff like that. I'd be curious for your thoughts, if anything, on this, Dylan.
It feels a lot like targeting in college football, where
it's a good point.
You'll have these long reviews and there's no consensus, right? You're watching a review of a foul, and obviously it'll be something like Nick Ward got flipped, but I really don't think that. I think it was Cheatham, is that his name?
Yeah,
the Marquette transfer.
Yeah,
I don't think he tried to. He was completely overpowered and was just trying to box out Nick Ward.
Right.
And
right. You know when you see a guy slide and undercut, like you know it, right? And I don't think it was that.
And then the hook and hold. A lot of these flagrants seem to be cases where a team is completely overpowered and is just trying, like the hook and hold seems to be a move that we always saw with Isaac Haas last year, and that's how he ended up getting hurt. It's guys just scrapping to hold on to whatever they can because they're just getting completely destroyed. So I think you're going to see it a lot in Michigan State games and teams with big, like Kansas games with Azubuike, something like that. So that's going to be an issue where I don't know if I consider that a flagrant foul. It's not like a dirty play necessarily. They're trying to take it out of the game. I get that, but it's just rough to watch these reviews, not know what's going on, and then kicked out of the game. Like it didn't seem like a justifiable ejection. If you ask me.
Yeah.
If Nick Ward just falls slightly softer, they might not even review that play.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the brutal things up there is there's no replay on the monitor. There aren't even televisions on press row, so we don't know what they're looking at. The fans don't know what they're looking at. There's no communication. There's no, this play's being reviewed for telling people exactly what's going on. Everyone's just kind of standing there staring at each other for 4 minutes. No one wants that. I don't think the rules committee, I don't think the officials want that. But this is the hard part. If something's going to be implemented, it's got to be implemented, right? If that's going to be what the rules committee wants, well, the officials have to do the job. I don't know what else you do with it.
So Izzo's comments seem to go beyond just the flagrant fouls, though. He seemed to be more just frustrated with how many fouls are being called, or is that wrong?
I think it was just a general airing of grievances, which he's known to do. I think it was more the confusion over the flagrants and the number of reviews is his major talking points. Because at the same
fouls
time,
were called on Florida Gulf Coast.
And he said like I'm speaking for Florida Gulf Coast, like this is
okay.
And but at the same time, Tom also says, I don't want it to go back to the old days when it was, just a football match out there and there wasn't any freedom of movement. You couldn't even send, a cutter through without him getting, knocked off his path. And he's like, I don't want that. I have no interest in that. But then at the same time, it's like, we need to get more physical. I might be putting the football pads on them tomorrow. And you're just like, well, he's all over the place. So, I'm not sure what he wants.
I also like Michigan State's roster is not particularly athletic, I would say, especially on the perimeter inside. Like they're wide, they're strong. They're not really a athletic team, and they want to play a certain way that's very physical. And early returns are that they've been fouling a lot, and I believe that was sort of the same story out of the Gonzaga scrimmage. So I wonder if that could be an issue that kind of hangs around for them just because of their personnel and how they play.
It certainly could be. And it'll be really curious to see what happens, against the UCLA in Vegas, or, if they play Carolina or Texas out there, and then the Louisville game. There are some spots where if they lose guys on to foul trouble, that there'll be some serious issues. But one point that I brought up to Tom and asked him about was, we've seen it in past years when, freedom of movement was the big thing and hand check was the big thing, and they would call it in the early season, and then just kind of in December it would be a little bit more normalized, and maybe the officials would call it a little bit differently, and then January
Big Ten season they're wrestling.
Exactly. I said, do you think there's a chance that this is just the case with this? And he obviously didn't have an answer for that, but there is a chance that this is just, you really legislate it for the first 3 weeks of November, and then you play basketball.
Yeah, it always seems like there's some rule like that, whatever point of emphasis, and then we forget about it by March.
Right.
You didn't happen to see the worst flagrant foul of the weekend, did you?
I did not.
Oklahoma State up 3 against Charlotte, tries to foul instead of defend. Called a flagrant.
Oh, no. I mean, did he tackle him?
Certainly did not look like a flagrant foul.
Oh,
Charlotte banks in a 3 after the flagrant free throws to win the game.
Charlotte did?
Yeah.
Big win for the 49ers. The program's been struggling.
Yeah, big win. Not a good moment for Oklahoma State, but
I think that's a first-year coach down there.
Yeah, there is.
Whose
Can't grab his name off the top of my head right now.
You don't have it on hand.
But it could always be worse. You could flagrant foul up 3 with 6 seconds left.
Well, speaking of other happenings in the world, this is my specialty, Dylan, is the transitions. If you haven't,
it was smooth.
If you haven't noticed, Big Ten. I don't know when to say it's lighting the world on fire.
Only one loss.
I would ask you, but some of the teams have looked a little rough. Some of the games that I've seen, at least. I mean, although literally that Ohio State Cincinnati game scarred my retinas. So
it's a big win.
Might just be the residual of that, but it goes back to what we were talking about last week, though, for sure. That's who gives a crap in March. The second week of March. All that matters is that that's a W, and the league needs it. So anything in particular jumping out to you?
That game was brutal to watch, but it was also a hell of a win. I think that really goes a long way for Ohio State. I didn't really know what to make of them, but it seems like they're going to play a lot of guys. They might not have one Bates Diop, but they have a lot of talent. They blew out Fort Wayne over the weekend then too, so they're looking solid. I mean, Holtman can coach. I think anyone that underrated him after last year is probably making a mistake. They have a good, Luther Muhammad's been starting. He's not really going to light up the stat sheet, but he's a good, tough, athletic guard. I mean, to go and win, opening a new building or a renovated building on the road against a Cincinnati team that's just dying to play Ohio State, never gets to. That's tough. That's a game that I don't know if it was the defense or if Cincinnati is that offensively challenged, but to win that, it counts for something. There wasn't really any other notable Big Ten games, a lot of overmatched teams, but this week coming up, I think should be a lot of fun. There's the Gavitt Games going on. Anything else catch your eye?
Well, I'm very interested in Wisconsin Xavier, I believe they have.
They've started a little bit of a rivalry.
Yeah, but then also that Indiana Marquette game, mainly because I want to see Romeo in a real game.
Those are good. I mean, even Georgetown at Illinois. Illinois looked great in their opener. The freshman Ao Desanmu looked really good, and they have a lot of guards. And Georgetown is more of a old school physical team, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how those styles contrast. This will be a really big week for the conference because these are the games that we talked about last week that really make the mark.
And that sneaky Iowa-Oregon game that
is in New York City.
That's an early. You go steal that. That'd be a really quality win. Ken Pom has Iowa losing by 4, but that would be one where I do think Iowa kind of has the odd pieces of a team that could, be a little bit of a sleeper. But if you go win a game like this, I might be a little bit more convinced. Let's put it that way.
I like them, but they only beat Green Bay by 11 points. Defense still looks to be an issue, and Oregon plays defense, and Bol has looked pretty incredible early on. He's their 5-star freshman. He is going to be a problem, I think, for Iowa, but that's a game that could be huge. I think even some of the games sort of you can't even sleep on a game. Like Minnesota hosts Utah this weekend. Utah's not great, but they're a tough team. Those are the kind of games that if you lose at home, it kind of dings you big, but a win sort of holds serve. So that could be a good one to watch. I think that game is Monday night or tonight.
Yes. And then another sneaky one is we haven't talked to Ohio State Creighton. Ohio State goes, if they steal that game, and they are by November 15th, you have wins over Cincinnati and Creighton. They're going to have something going there. and then would have 3 bye games that would lead them up to a home matchup against Syracuse. That would be significant if they get this Creighton win. You're looking at a team that could be like sneaking into the rankings. Well, not sneaking in, they would definitely jump up there and maybe be the early surprise of the league again.
They would certainly be trending in that direction, and they have pretty easy like Minnesota and Illinois in their December games. They'd be in good shape, really. They play UCLA before Christmas. It's a good schedule, I think, for them after they steal that game at Cincinnati. But Creighton will be tough, I think, on the road. That's an offense that is not going to shoot 15% or whatever Cincinnati did.
Yep.
They can shoot the ball, which will. The Gavitt Games have tied 4-4 every year, which is an odd quirk.
Fact.
But I wonder if this could be a year, like if these all look like games that are winnable for the Big Ten.
They all also look losable.
I agree with that. It will really give us something to actually go off of instead of just looking at crazy stats like Ethan Happ has assisted 86.5% of Wisconsin made shots in the first game. Like, we need to see these teams play against real opponents. And this basically after this week, I think everyone will pretty much play at least one sort of high major opponent, which will give us sort of a measuring stick in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds about right to me. I think it'll be another pretty much even split. I don't think that there are there's not that much dividing those two leagues at this point. It's for a team like Michigan going to Villanova, like a game like that, or a game at Creighton, like we're talking about, like you're kind of and a game at Xavier, right? I believe Wisconsin's at Xavier.
Mm-hmm.
You can not many teams win in any of those buildings, so you're almost starting off. You could say you're starting off with 3 losses.
But we got some heat for our anti-Rutgers views, but the St. John's can't just walk into the rack and come out with a victory.
Oh boy! Wow, bold proclamations. The war on the Turnpike, man. That's a big one for sure. But like, hey, St. John's is considered a contender in the league. Maybe Rutgers steals. I mean, they're not going to win that game. So let's just stop that right there.
The one game we didn't talk about is Seton Hall at Nebraska. This is going to be Nebraska just dominated their first 2 games. They gave up 37 and 35 points, but these are the games now that we talked about all last year that Nebraska didn't win. So we're really going to see, I think, if they can. Seton Hall is good, but they're not great. Can Nebraska defend home court? Can they go and win some games that actually count? Because we're going to keep hearing about it if they do.
Yeah, I like them at home. That's their home court advantage is as good as it gets. Especially this time of year. That's what I really find impressive about Nebraska. You see some of these places, especially the traditional football schools that just really don't have any kind of home environment in November and early December. But, Nebraska, they bring it. That'll be a real game. I definitely like them to win that and get some early season momentum here. They looked, at least from the highlights I saw, they looked great yesterday.
Yeah, their numbers are all just ridiculous because they've just been throttling teams. But
Right.
Glenn Watson making some threes, which is key because he really shot the ball poorly last year. He's 7 of 12 from 3, which last year I think he was in the 29% last year. So if he had a really bad year, I was pretty high on him early in his career, and last year just sort of all fell apart. If he's going to be hitting threes at a high level, that could be really huge for them, I think, because they have so many talented wings already.
They do. They're so long, and That's probably why Mississippi Valley State and Southeastern Louisiana scored 37 and 35 points against the mighty Huskers.
Going back to Iowa first, I think there's been a couple notable freshmen, but Joe Wieskamp at Iowa is starting and has been playing really well. He's at like 30 minutes a game for them, and Fran doesn't really play anyone 30 minutes a game, so the fact that he's playing heavy minutes early, he's shooting 50% from three. I think he's going to be a guy that you really want to keep an eye on because there's a lot of good freshmen in this league, but you kind of forget about some of them. And he would be one that I would keep close tabs on going forward.
Next year when Michigan State finally plays a Gavitt Games matchup, taking out Villanova, what's the game? What program would you like to see them play?
What program would I like to see Michigan State play? Not Villanova.
Yeah, because Villanova is just too obvious of an answer.
How about... So, I think Xavier would be a fun one. I think they would be a
bloodbath.
A good toughness. That's why, Wisconsin Xavier's kind of worked in that same way where they've just gone at it, it seems like, over and over in the Gavitt Games. Butler could be fun.
If it's at Hinkle, sign me up.
I also Creighton. I like when Creighton's good. I would like to see their kind of contrasting styles against Michigan State. Right,
they can get out and go right.
Perimeter, yeah. But and looking at this, the Big East has a lot of solid teams, but there's not like when you're looking at the Big Ten ACC challenges. There's high profile mark. It's easy to come up with a marquee matchup. Right. Michigan State, Duke, Michigan State, North Carolina. Nothing really pops off the page in the Big East. Do you see one that you'd like to see?
Yeah, I'm on board with at Butler. I think that'd be cool to see Michigan State play at Hinkle. They played at the Palestra 2-3 years ago. This would be very similar. That would be ideal for sure. If I had to take a second pick, I would probably go... Well, I'd like to see Marquette's new building, so if they could maybe get me a trip out there, that'd be great. Otherwise, probably Xavier, just to watch the two of them beat the hell out of each other.
That would be a fun one. See, this Xavier team is not really.
No, this year's
Xavier team.
This year is not typical. This might be looking a little bit closer to the old A10 version of Xavier, not this monster Big East program that it's kind of grown into. But okay, do we have anything else?
I think I'm good, ready to see how the Big Ten plays this week.
You handle the sales pitch this time. I took it at the top. You get it here.
So if you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. Give us the rating you feel. If it's not 5 stars, we'll take it.
Room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. It's a growth mindset.
Oh, there it is. Maybe that should have been the name of the pod.
The name of the pod is not gonna draw a 5-star review.
Okay.
Oh man, we'll catch up with you guys. We got a little more basketball to watch.
Very good. Look forward to it. Talk to everyone next week. Thanks a lot.